Hello, and welcome to Palindrome ASMR, the show where I normally speak randomly into a microphone because apparently it relaxes people. But today, I will be reading a book, The Lassifia by Zeppy Chang. That's me. This is an 80,000 word book with 231 pages. I will not read the entire book, most likely. I will read as much of it as I am comfortable with reading before I stop. So, grab a hot cup of hot cocoa, sit down in a chair, and enjoy the book. The Lassifia by Zeppy Chang. Chapter 1. All aboard the Lassifia. Sel stood on a cold skyship dock in harsh winter wind with his jacket tight around his chest. Ah, shit. Ah, shit. It's cold. What am I doing here? He shivered. Where are you, Lassifia? Which ship is you? The skyships gave him no answer, sitting in their berths in the stone cold with their snails. Snails. I said snails instead of sails. With their sails snapping in the wind. Sel began to walk down the platform. The walls of Kolodapur rose to his left. The open sky stretched out to his right, its bottom green carpet far below, its end unseen, an ocean of air. This was supposed to be a job. She said they would meet me here. I didn't mishear, did I? It's all her fault that I did. Screw her. Sel hunched his shoulders and continued walking down the dock. His breath condensed in front of his lips and wafted away on the wind. He stopped in front of a skyship. Oh. It was a small ship, hidden between two larger schooners, with the name Lassifia painted in large white letters on its side. How did I miss that? Sel rubbed his hands together and blew on them. A voice came from the space between the ships. You cold, friend? A man stepped out of the shadows, tall, wearing a leather cuirass and a cutlass on his hip, and a bandana on his head. He had a mustache, a long one. He stopped in front of Sel and crossed his arms. I see you looking at the Lassifia. Eh? Sel said. Me? Do you see anyone else on this dock? Sel looked to his left, then to his right. No, I don't. Exactly. So what are you doing, friend? I'm not your friend, said Sel. The man spat. You are if I say you are. Sel rustled his jacket. And what if I don't want to be your friend? The man laughed. That's funny. Real funny. Now, if you don't want to get involved in some trouble, move along. Sel looked once more at the name Lassifia painted on the side of the ship. This is the Lassifia, right? What, you illiterate or something? Sel sighed. No, I'm here for the job. The man raised his eyebrows, narrowed his eyes, and stared at Sel. And then he broke out into a big smile. Well, why didn't you say so? He walked up to Sel and took his hand, and then shook it. Welcome to the crew of the Lassifia. Reiko has told me a lot about you. You must be Sel, right? Sel grinned awkwardly. Yeah, I am. Ah, said the man. I've been waiting here for you for ages. It's cold. He paused. My name's Frisk, by the way. I'm the quartermaster. And you waited here to greet me? Am I that important? We got 4 people in our crew. 5, including you. Rank don't mean much. Frisk smiled broader. I've been waiting for this. A new crew member. This may be a bit early, but welcome to the family. Sel gave a nervous chuckle. Yeah, thank you. I feel like I've known you for ages, Sel. Reiko talks about you all the time. Sel grimaced. I see. Frisk laughed, a big, hearty guffaw that carried on the wind. Ah, let's get on board and meet the rest of the crew, besides Reiko, of course, but you already know her. He winked big. That naughty Reiko, huh? It's not that, said Sel. Frisk acted as if he had not heard. Well now, come. Let's see here. He pointed to the front part of the ship that swept up and ended in a point. That's the bowsprit, he said, pointing to the mast at the front of the ship. That's the foremast. I know my terms, said Sel. Frisk frowned and then smiled. You do. Ah, you do. He turned to the ship's deck. Belize, let down the gangplank. Nothing happened. Frisk stomped on the ground. Belize! After a moment, a man emerged from the hold and walked over to the side of the ship, where he grabbed a piece of wood and laid it over the gap between the ship and the dock. He was gruff, stout, with lots of black hair and a bushy beard that went down to his neck. "Were you reading a book again?" asked Frisk. Belize grunted. Frisk sighed. "You know you have your duties." Belize waved his hand. "I know, boss. I was going to do them." Frisk stepped up onto the Lassifia. "As long as you do them." He turned to Sel. "Come, you still have to meet the captain." Sel stepped up onto the deck and followed Frisk down a hatch into the hold. A single magical lantern bathed the whole room in a yellow glow. 4 beds hung on the walls, 2 on each side. 1 door stood towards the back of the ship, and another stood towards the front. A closed trapdoor took up a quarter of the floor. A pulsating web of pipes and antennae took up most of the port bulkhead next to the bunks, giving off a solid warmth centered on a black crystal full of liquid. Sel stared at it for a moment before turning back to Frisk. Frisk walked up the aft door and knocked. "Captain, the new scrub is here." There was a shuffling behind the door. The voice of a young girl, perhaps 12, sounded out. "Just a minute." More shuffling. "Come in." Frisk opened the door. Sel walked in behind him. He stood in a cramped room full of books and charts and maps and scrolls of various sizes. In the center of it all, behind a desk, sat a girl who looked to be as old as she sounded. Soft features, flat chest, straight hair that fell down to her back, intelligent eyes. She looked up at Frisk. "You're the new guy?" She leaned back in her chair. "Not as handsome as Reiko made you out to be." She paused, then chuckled to herself. Just kidding, you're fine. I'd go for you if I were a little bit older." She started to laugh, then caught Frisk's respectfully strange glare. She cleared her throat. "I'm the captain around here, so you have to do what I say." Frisk made a gesture. The captain made a face. "And I'm actually 345, so don't try any moves on me. Seriously, don't. Save that for Reiko. Romance is permitted on this ship, as long as it doesn't lead to babies. Because babies are hard to take care of and they poop all over the place. Do you see any diapers here?" She seemed to catch herself. And also get along with Belize. He doesn't like company, but I'm sure he'll get used to you." She paused. "What else?" Frisk cleared his throat. "Fire safety, storm procedures, watch breakdown, work assignments." The captain turned up our hands. We'll take care of that later. "Oh, I know what else. We don't have a latrine on this ship, so you'll just have to go over the edge. Get used to seeing other people in the act and doing it yourself. We're a tight crew." "Captain," said Frisk. The captain laughed. "And that's about it. My name's Toby Jess. Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you," said Sel. "I would shake your hand, but I don't want to stand up." "That's fine," said Sel. He tried his best to smile. Toby waved her hand dismissively. "Out. I have work to do. Our next mission. Very important. Top secret stuff. Lots of cold, hard, crisp writing on this one." She rubbed her thumb and forefinger together. Sel nodded, then turned and left the captain's quarters. Frisk followed. When the door was shut, Sel turned to Frisk. "Is she always like this?" he asked. Frisk sighed. "I'm afraid so. But she does her job, and she does it well. I have a question." "Yes?" "How is she 345? She's immortal." "I get that. I mean, she doesn't act like it, or look like it. And how would you know what immortals are supposed to look and act like?" Toby's voice came through the door. "I can hear you." Frisk cringed. "Sorry, Captain. I meant no offense." Toby laughed. "Skay." Sel sighed. Frisk sighed with him. "Come, I'll show you your duties." He began to climb the ladder to the upper deck. Sel followed. When he came up, Belize was waiting beside the hatch. He met Sel's gaze, nodded, and began climbing down. Sel watched him for a second. Then he turned and faced Frisk. Frisk pointed to the sails. "You know how to raise a sail, right?" Sel nodded. "I was taught in school." Frisk grinned. "A good education you got there." "Not particularly," said Sel. Frisk clapped Sel on the back. "Don't say that. Sky sailing is perhaps the most useful skill you'll ever learn. Take it from me, the man who's seen it all." He laughed. Sel nodded. "I will. So basically my duties are to just be a sailor?" Frisk chuckled. "You take on quick. There isn't much else we can do on this tub." He paused. "Other than fight, of course. You know how to fight, right?" Sel shook his head. "I don't think so." Frisk opened his eyes wide. "Really? What with all the scrapes that you and Reiko got into? I had you pinned as the kind who knew his way around a brawl." Sel scratched the back of his neck. "Well, I mean, most of those fights were pretty small. Reiko must have talked them up." "Never," said Frisk. "Reiko would never do that. She's trustworthy. Trustworthy as iron, steel, electrum." "Electrum?" "I don't know. I like the word. What of it?" Cell chuckled a little. I see. He stretched his arms and inhaled a breath of the sharp, cold air. Well, when are we going on our next journey? As soon as the captain finishes her paperwork, and as soon as Ryoko gets back with the supplies. Cell looked around the ship. It was small, and probably not that well preserved, but it seemed both at once to be larger than life and more than it looked. It seemed like a real place, somewhere that he might eventually be able to call home. Yeah, Ryoko, bring that cart up here now. Frisk stood at the edge of the deck, waving both hands over his head. Cell stood beside Belize on the dock side of the gangplank. The sharp, cold wind mussed his hair and pulled at the edges of his jacket. What am I doing here? It seemed just like yesterday that he had lost his job in the warehouse district because of that stupid shift manager who wouldn't take responsibility for his own action. All the blame for the incident had gone to Cell, and so he had been fired. But hopefully I won't be fired from this job. Reiko brought the cart up to the side of the ship. She was of medium height, somewhat attractive, with short brown hair and an expression on her face that was unreadable. She wore simple clothing that emphasized her vocation, sky sailing. Her hair was tied up in a hurried ponytail. You talked about me, said Cell, as she passed him on the dock. Reiko looked up at Cell, grimaced, said nothing, and turned back to the cart. I'm fine with that, said Cell, as long as you didn't say anything bad about me. Reiko leaned forward slightly and gripped a small barrel at the top of the pile of goods on the cart. Take this. She turned around and tossed it up into the air. Cell scrambled to catch it. It landed in his arms, heavy, enough to hurt. Cell glanced up at Reiko. She's strong. Reiko noticed Cell's glance and raised an eyebrow. What, can you carry more? Cell shook his head. No, just looking, I mean. He closed his mouth. Better not to say more. Reiko pursed her lips and grabbed a crate. Belize. Belize stepped forward and held out his arms. Reiko tossed the crate at him. He caught it, and then turned around and began walking up the gangplank. Reiko glanced at the barrel in Cell's arms. What are you waiting for? She motioned with her neck. Take it to the hold. She grabbed the crate, lifted it up, and walked past Cell. Cell followed her up the plank. You don't have to be so mad at me, he thought. What did I do to you? Did I do something to make you angry? He closed his eyes and grimaced for a moment. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Why did it have to turn out this way? He opened his eyes and carried the barrel across the deck to the hatch leading down to the mid-deck. Belize stood at the bottom. Hand it over, he said. Cell handed the barrel down to Belize. Even though it was only the size of his chest, it was heavy, and he wondered what was in it. And Belize handed it to Toby, who rolled it down the open mid-deck hatch, where Frisk caught it, disappeared into the bowels of the ship, only to reappear a second later without it. Reiko looked at Cell. Come on, what are you waiting for? There's still more to load. Cell sighed. He got off his knees and followed Reiko across the deck to the gangplank, and then across to the dock. The cart was still mostly full. Reiko took a crate as big as herself in both arms and hoisted it up. Here, think you can handle this one? Said Cell. I'm not sure. Reiko pushed the crate onto Cell. You're carrying it anyways. You're big and strong, right? Cell took the crate without complaining. He turned towards the gangplank. Are you mad at me for something? Reiko said nothing for a moment. No. Why should I be? You're mad, aren't you? Reiko let out a breath. Look, if I say I'm not mad, I'm not mad. You're mad. Drop it. Cell cringed, then turned towards the gangplank. Reiko followed after him silently. Cell shifted the crate in his arms. You know, maybe if I said drop it. Cell said nothing. He handed his crate down to Belize. It was tough on his back and stood up. Reiko did the same. She wiped her hands off on her pants. You're not usually this way, said Cell. I mean, don't you usually talk about things like this? Reiko said nothing, acting as if she had not heard. She started towards the gangplank. Cell followed her. Seriously, I want to know. What's bothering you? Reiko stopped, then turned around. You, shut up. Aren't you usually more sensitive? Said Cell. He played with his thumbs. What does that mean? It means you're being an idiot, a stupid, bumbling idiot who has no respect for a girl's feelings. So, shut up. Cell grimaced. Okay, I will. I promise. He paused. You just have to promise to. Shut up, Cell sighed. Fine, you win. I won't talk anymore. Reiko gave a sigh of relief. Finally, she turned around. We still have work to do. A minute passed. Cell hoisted up a crate. You know. Gah! Reiko tossed her arms up. I can't do this anymore. I can't. She pointed her finger at Cell. If I have to live with you for months on end, I don't know how I'm going to. What's that face for? Cell gave an awkward smile. I was only going to talk about the weather. It's cold, you know, since you seem so tense. Reiko sighed. What do I do with you? She lifted up her barrel and walked past Cell. I know, I really don't know. Cell followed Reiko up the plank. He handed down his crate after her. Sorry about being nosy. Reiko paused. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Just don't talk about it anymore. They passed the rest of the loading process in silence. When they were done, Toby called them all to a meeting in the galley, the room behind the door at the front of the mid-deck. It was cramped, just large enough to fit 5 people and a table, plus a small kitchen. All right, people, said Toby, lifting up a mug of milk. This is it. She took a drink from her mug, then slammed it down on the table. She wiped her mouth on her sleeve. We're going into a war zone. She held up her palm. But before you start complaining, I will tell you the reason why we're going. She smiled. The moolah is good. She grinned. We're going to make the big bucks. I'm talking thousands, tens of thousands. She pumped her fist in the air. I'm psyched. Is there a reason why the money is so good? Asked Frisk. Toby paused for a second. Then she regained her composure. It's a war zone, folks. Consider it danger compensation pay. Frisk crossed his arms. Who's the employer? Toby played with her hair. The Alarian government. Frisk tapped his finger against his shoulder. And what do they want us to do? Recover something. Do you know what that thing is? Is it dangerous? Where is it? Could it possibly be on the sky floor? Toby laughed nervously. Yeah, you see, it's kind of on the sky floor, and it does happen to be dangerous. Very, very dangerous. But hey, look here, I can handle it. I promise. They don't call me Toby Mage Def just for nothing. She smiled. Frisk frowned. Nicknames notwithstanding, have you done your research properly? Toby's face became serious. Yes, I have. And I have decided as your captain that we can handle this. We've done worse in the past. When? Toby's seriousness broke. She tossed up her hands. Gah! You want a full list? You can handle the documents. She put her finger to her lips. But wait, I don't think that time was recorded. She shrugged. It was the time we had to break Lucifer out of prison. Cell raised his eyebrows. Lucifer? The Lucifer? There were a lot of politics that went into that one, said Toby. Let's just say he was framed for his crimes by an establishment that wanted a scapegoat, and leave it at that. Cell chewed on his lip. He wanted to know more. Toby took a drink from her mug, drained it, and then slammed the cup on the table. White milk covered her upper lip. You can ask later if you want to know more. For now, this is the mission we're dealing with. She looked down at her nose, her eyes crossed, and she licked her upper lip. Then she wiped it on her sleeve. She smiled. Don't worry, scrub. We'll take good care of you. This mission ain't nothing. I promise you'll do good. She paused. As long as you can fight. You can fight, can't you? Fight what? Asked Cell. I don't know. Monsters, robot pirates, undead. Toby held up 3 fingers, then continued counting. Evil fairies, dragons. She held up another hand. Dark elves, cave dwarves, ulukuk, crashed Cartesians, goblins. She looked at both of her hands, all 10 fingers up. Am I forgetting anything? Kaiju, said Frisk. Spirits. Turned demigods? Toby nodded. Yeah, those. Other non-evil sentient races? Said Reiko. Toby grimaced. Hopefully not. Gnomes? Offered Belize. Toby laughed. Those aren't real. Have you been reading too many conspiracy theories? Belize grunted. Toby puffed her cheeks. So yeah, those, minus the gnomes. Maybe some other things we forgot to mention. Cell grimaced. Are those out there? In the open sky? Some of them. But most of them are down on the sky floor. It's dangerous, you know. And are we going down there? It will be an adventure, Toby paused. More importantly, we need to know how good you are at fighting. Can you use any weapons? Cell thought for a moment, then shook his head. No, I don't think so. Toby frowned. Can you fight with martial arts? I know you've been in a few scuffles in your time, but have you been trained? Cell shook his head. Toby leaned back in her seat, grabbed for her mug, lifted it up, looked at it with a surprised expression, tipped it over and shook it, stared at its empty interior, and then slammed it down on the table, upside down. We're going to have to train you. Frisk here is a master swordsman. Belize is much a better battle mage than he looks. Me, I do the defense. I can also do the offense if needed. Reiko can use a whip like no one else. She's scary when she's mad and has a piece of rope in her hands. She's scarier with a real whip. She tapped her fingers on the table. You can take your pick. Who do you want to teach you? She seemed to think better of it. On second thought, you'll train with everyone so that we can find your aptitude. Then you can choose. Cell nodded. I understand. Which do I want? He looked at Reiko. I would. He shook his head. No. I'll pick this based on what I want to do rather than what I feel. All right, said Toby. Are we all in understanding about this mission? Any more questions? No one responded. Toby slapped her palm on the table. Good, because it's time for a history lesson. She waited for a second, looking around the room. What, no response? No groans of disappointment? No one responded. Toby tossed up her hands. You guys, come on. Interact with me a bit more. This is supposed to be fun. Well, I guess it is if you don't say it isn't. Sweet mother of Lord Harry, I don't even know anymore. I'm just going to talk now. She put her hands back onto the table. We're working for the archipelago state of Arlaria. It's a group of islands south-southwest of here that was a Bilvian colony up until a year ago, when they revolted against the Empire because of some unfair trade laws, and some taxes levied on their tea. So the archipelago of Alaria was colonized about 200 years ago, in 1606, when the explorer Albert Lowden discovered it in a region of space previously thought to be empty. Lots of people immigrated there because the islands are big and there are lots of resources, and most importantly, space. The people were either religious fundamentals looking for a place away from the other sects, or opportunists looking to recover some of the island's vast material wealth. Whatever the case, they're essentially a unit of islands, or a republic formed out of a group of disparate people who all have the same goal in mind, which is to become independent. The Belvian Empire had, until recently, been treating the colony with a policy of salutary neglect, but because of the Empire's wars with other nations in the colonial archipelago, more support was needed from the outlying colonies, and as such the Empire took to a more controlling policy, which the people of Valeria didn't like because they had been essentially free for more than 100 years. They wanted to create a nation based on the freedom of man and individual rights represented by government instead of repressed. Toby grinned. None of this ties into the reason why we're helping them. Like I said, we're getting the big bucks. Politics has no place here in Lassifia, but I thought I'd share this with you because it's fun. She leaned back. About the mission, the ship Hornus was transporting an important magical spell from the Library of Beastis on the island of Collis to the garrison city of New Kelvin on the island of Valeria. The spell is now a new development built to counter the Empire's death mages, which are a relatively new development themselves. However, the Hornus was lost in transit, most likely due to enemy action. They had no reason to suspect that the ship was carrying something so important, so it might have simply been floored, and is now resting at the bottom of the sky. It's our mission to go there and retrieve the spell. We have an approximate location and 3 weeks to find it. That's about it. Any questions? No response. You already asked that, said Reiko. Dobie puffed her cheeks. I did? Oh, yeah, I did. No questions, then. She raised her fist into the air. We're off. Dismissed and prepare for departure. Sel got out of his chair with the rest of the crew and waited his turn in line to leave through the door, then climbed up the hatched ladder to the main deck. Frisk hurried past with a hard expression on his face. Raise sails. Cast off. Sel, come with me. Sel followed him to where the mizzenmast stood, at the back of the ship. Frisk pointed to where the spars branched out. Rope netting led down to them from the deck. The mizzenmast is your job, said Frick. From now on, whenever we cast off, it will be your responsibility to work. You said you were taught in school? Sel put his hands in his pockets. I was. Frisk nodded. Good, I'll be back to check your work. He walked back across the deck to the mainmast, and began to climb the rigging. Sel climbed the mizzenmast's rigging and made it to the point where the spars branched, and then climbed out onto the spars, keeping his feet locked in the rope footholds. The cold wind battered at his jacket. He untied the sails and let them down part by part, and then secured them when he was done. He climbed back down and looked up to examine his handiwork. As good as it can be, he thought. Belize stood at the helm. Reiko finished casting off from the docks. Toby waited at the side of the deck, beside a massive wooden beam laden with white sails. The wind picked up in the direction away from the dock. The Lassifia began to move. The other ships pulled away slowly. When they were some distance away from the other ships, Frisk stepped up onto the quarterdeck. Extend Esben masts! He then hurried over to where Toby stood and grabbed hold of the large wooden beam and began to push. Sel rushed over to the port side of the ship, where Reiko stood beside an identical beam, and assisted her in pushing the beam out over the open sky. It locked into place with a clunk, a long wooden pike extending out of the ship's side like the bone of a wing. Reiko began to climb up onto it. Sel hesitated. There didn't look to be much support. Nothing to catch him if he fell. Reiko paused halfway across the Esben mast. What are you waiting for? Nothing, said Sel. He climbed onto the mast and began to inch his way across. Reiko made it to the end of the mast. Release on my signal. Sel got into place and kept his hand on the knot that held the sail around the mast. Release, said Reiko. A gigantic triangular sheet of cloth dropped down behind Sel and began to flap in the wind. Reiko inched her way back towards Sel and stopped right beside him. You're in the way, she said. Sel clambered off the mast and looked back onto the deck. Reiko stayed and began to climb down the side of the ship. She reached the bottom and secured the Esben sail. It puffed, full of wind. She came back up and stepped off onto the deck, wiping her hands off on her shirt. You'll get better, she said, patting Sel on the shoulder and walking past. Sel let out a breath and looked up at the sky. Yeah, I will. that is the end of Chapter 1 of the Lassifia, and that is the end of today's reading. Now, I hope you all enjoyed that. That was actually pretty fun. I was reading pretty fast at the end. I kind of got into it, and I read as best I could. I hope you enjoyed my voice. People usually tell me that I'm a good reader. I don't know how good of a reader I am because I can't judge myself based on my voice. But my voice is starting to get a little hoarse, and I think you'll probably relaxed enough now that I don't have to read any longer. So I hope that was relaxing. If that wasn't relaxing, I apologize. But if you've made it this far, thank you, and I thank you, and you're amazing. I frankly think anyone who watches my videos all the way through is amazing and should be rewarded with something. I'm not sure what. Maybe just with the knowledge that you're one of the few people who gets thanked because you watched the video all the way through. Now, when I watch ASMR, usually I take the video and I tab it away so I'm not actually watching them. I'm just listening, and that's how my videos are meant to be used. Because the camera quality is so low, I really don't expect anyone to be watching this in however they watch it. I'm just expecting people to be listening to this because I do have a rather good microphone. Excuse me. I don't think I'm gonna edit that out because, well, frankly, I'm not very good at editing, and the jump will probably be more disruptive than the actual burp. But talking in this voice actually causes me to have a lot of gas, frankly. It's a truth about talking in a low voice. Well, not really low, this is just from my stomach. My normal voice doesn't sound like this, usually. I think. I'm actually not sure now. I'm not sure if this is my normal voice or not. Can that happen? Can you lose track of whether or not your voice is your actual voice? Well, I am going to stop there, and I am going to read the next chapter if this video becomes successful. If enough people watch this video for enough minutes, then I will, and if people express an interest in watching the second episode or reading the second chapter, then I will read the second chapter. But for now, this is just a test. This is a test with a new format and a new camera angle so that you can hear me read out loud, because that's one of the things that I really wanted to do on this channel that I regret many main YouTubers not doing. Reading aloud on their channel in as calm and nice a voice as possible. I did read it a little bit fast, and I apologize for that. I probably should have read it a little bit slower, but that was reading aloud with Zeppy Cheng, the author of the Lassifia. Now, thank you for watching. Thank you. Again, thank you. I can't thank you enough. And I will be back tomorrow. Today is a double upload. One reading aloud, and one making a game ASMR. Two things that I really like doing. And tomorrow I will be back with a traditional ASMR video, along with another episode of making a game ASMR. Thank you for watching, and I'll be, wherever you can find me on the internet.